No, you aren't confused as to which day it is. This is a special episode of the Presidencies of the United States, and I'm your host, Jerry Landry. When I started this podcast in January 2017, I launched it with the intention of not just geeking out to presidential history, but also helping to educate the audience on how presidential history ties into what's going on in the present day. By design, the current podcast is a chronological narrative, which means some stories of presidential history are going to take a while to get to on this podcast. Thus, I'd been thinking for some time about how I might be able to get to those later stories that are relevant to current events sooner. The time to pursue that seemed right when I heard about the Queen City PodQuest, a contest being put on by our local national public radio station, WFAE. The top 5 entries will get one-on-one coaching, and the winner is up for a possible production deal. To that end, I put my hat in the ring with a pitch for a spinoff of Presidencies called 45 and Counting, which is intended to be a non-linear look at presidential history which relates to events in today's headlines. Mine was one of over 370 entries to make it into the public voting round. But here's where I need your help. We're now on the 4th day of voting, and while I'm still in the leaderboard, I've got some distance to make up in order to catch up to the top 5, which will be the cutoff for the finals when the contest ends on Sunday, February 17th, 2019. I've got a staunch group of supporters who are voting each day, but we've got to have some new voters to join us in order to push ahead. All you've got to do is click on the link which will be included with this posting or is readily available on all of my social media. Then click Vote Now. That's it. A couple of seconds each day, and you can help to not only support this history podcaster, but history podcasters everywhere. In the podcasting realm, history podcasts are often overshadowed by true crime, comedy, or human interest podcasts. While their work is admirable, and I know there are tons of folks in those genres who put in the same amount of hard work and perseverance as myself and other history podcasters. To me, history is not only entertaining, but informative and even inspiring. It helps us to understand that we're not alone in our struggles, that there are folks just like us who decades and centuries past faced many hardships, some of which we can't begin to imagine, but that still managed to find their way through. It helps to inspire us to overcome our obstacles, as well as gives us some hints on what not to do. The fact that a history podcast has remained in the top 20 in a contest with over 370 entries is great, but I'm not one to settle for good enough. If you've learned nothing else about me from this podcast, it's that I'm in this for the long haul. And obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, it means that you are as well, and that you appreciate history podcasts just as much as I do. This is your chance to show your support. Like I said, the link is on the post for this episode, or you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/presidencies, on Twitter at presidencies89, or on Instagram at Presidencies Podcast, all one word, and you'll see plenty of posts about the Queen City PodQuest. You do have to have a Facebook account in order to vote, but other than that, it really is a quick process and would mean the world to me. Help me to advance the reach of history podcasting. Vote early, vote often, vote 45 and counting. Thanks so much for listening. And until next time, take care, dear friends.
This is Peter.
And this is Tom.
We want to tell you guys a little bit about our podcast. Tom and I met in college, became best friends, and then teachers almost 20 years ago. Sometimes school just does not allow us to elaborate on the topics that we find interesting, like the real shark attacks that inspired the movie Jaws, or the real historical context to Indiana Jones artifacts. Where does cereal come from? Or are zombies real? Does Ben Franklin really deserve to be on a $100 bill? On our podcast, just like in our class, there are no stupid questions.
Just two friends having a lighthearted conversation about history, pop culture, and the context of current events.
Listen to History Teachers Talking Podcast from Evergreen Network, anywhere you get your podcasts.